I'm Maya Singh, 30 years old, an attorney in Chicago. For 3 years, I poured my heart and soul into working for Arthur Vance, the mentor I once revered. But when his mistake pushed a $10 billion case to the brink of collapse, he confessed everything, then coldly demanded that I take the fall. He wanted me to sacrifice my career, my reputation, and my future, all to preserve his own. In that moment, every trace of respect I had for him died, leaving only fury. Arthur saw me as a naive pawn, convinced I would quietly destroy myself for his sake. But he was wrong. For weeks, I had sensed he would try to make me his shield. So the moment I walked into his office, I switched on the recorder hidden in my bag. And now, it holds every word of his confession. He thought he was burying me. In truth, he handed me the weapon to bring down the empire he built. And I swear, I will use it to destroy him, not only in court, but before the very justice he betrayed. The hum of the HVAC system in the offices of Sterling and Vance was the city's lullaby, a constant white noise that filled the hours between midnight and dawn. For 3 years, it had been the soundtrack to my life. My name is Maya Singh, and at 30 years old, I was an associate at one of Chicago's most prestigious law firms, a place where ambition was the air you breathed and sleep was a currency you couldn't afford. Our 45th floor office was a glass-and-steel cathedral dedicated to the gods of billable hours and courtroom victories, and its high priest was Arthur Vance. Arthur wasn't just a partner, he was an institution. Silver-haired, impeccably dressed, with a voice that could soothe a hostile witness and charm a skeptical jury, he was the firm's rainmaker. I was on his team, a position most associates would have killed for. He'd taken me under his wing right after I passed the bar, promising me a direct path to partnership if I proved my worth. And I had. I worked harder, billed more hours, and dug deeper than anyone. I lived on black coffee and the adrenaline of finding the one precedent, the one loophole that could turn a case. "Maya, you're still here?" Arthur's voice, smooth as aged whiskey, echoed from the doorway of my small office. I looked up from a mountain of discovery documents, my eyes gritty with exhaustion. It was almost 1 a.m., just cross-referencing the depositions for the Innovatech case, Arthur, I said, pushing my glasses up my nose. "I think I found something." He stepped inside, his expensive leather shoes silent on the plush carpet. He exuded an aura of effortless power. "Always finding something, that's my girl." He picked up a document from my desk, a faint, approving smile on his lips. "What is it this time?" "It's about the timeline. Cygnus Corp claims their lead engineer developed the source code in May, but his keycard access logs show he was on a flight to Zurich that entire week. The flight manifest confirms it. He couldn't have been in the lab." Arthur's smile widened into a grin. It was the look of a predator who just cornered its prey. "A smoking gun. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful work, Maya. This could be what cracks the whole case open." He placed the document back down, his hand briefly resting on my shoulder. "You have a brilliant legal mind. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Praise from Arthur was like a drug, a potent validation that made the sleepless nights and missed social events feel worthwhile. "Thank you, Arthur." "We're a team," he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "You find the bullets, I fire the gun. Together we're unstoppable. Now go home, get some rest. The real battle begins in court next week." I nodded, but I didn't leave. I stayed for another hour, meticulously organizing the evidence, creating a separate file for the access logs and the flight manifest, and emailing a summary to Arthur with the subject line, "Innovatech versus Cygnus, critical timeline discrepancy." My memory is good, but documentation is better. It was a mantra my father, a retired federal judge, had drilled into me since I was a child. The Innovatech case was our firm's white whale, a $10 billion corporate espionage lawsuit. Our client, Liam Hayes, CEO of Innovatech, accused their biggest rival, Cygnus Corp, of stealing proprietary technology. It was a case built on a mountain of circumstantial evidence, and we were struggling to find a direct link. My discovery was the first piece of concrete proof we had. Liam was more than just a client. He was one of my father's oldest and dearest friends. The pressure to win wasn't just professional, it was personal. The next morning, the office was buzzing. Arthur had called an emergency strategy meeting. In the main conference room, with its panoramic view of the glittering Chicago skyline, he laid out my discovery to the senior partners. "As you can see," Arthur concluded, his voice resonating with authority, "we now have undeniable proof that Cygnus's lead engineer has perjured himself in his deposition. His entire testimony is now compromised." He didn't mention my name once. He presented it as his own discovery, his own brilliant deduction. I felt a familiar sting of disappointment, but I pushed it down. As he'd said, we were a team. The win was what mattered. David Chen, our team's senior paralegal and my closest thing to a friend at the firm, caught my eye and gave me a subtle, sympathetic shrug. He knew, he always knew. So we go for the throat, one of the partners, Mr. Harrison said, a shark-like glint in his eyes. Motion to strike his testimony. File for sanctions against their counsel for presenting false evidence. Exactly, Arthur agreed. We dismantle their credibility piece by piece until their entire case collapses. I watched him, a master puppeteer at work, and felt a twinge of unease. There was a coldness to his ambition that I'd always chosen to ignore. Jessica Riley, another associate on the team who viewed me as her primary competition, was practically glowing with admiration for Arthur. It's a brilliant strategy, Arthur. Truly, she gushed. I had to resist the urge to roll my eyes. The week before the trial was a blur of caffeine and frantic preparation. We were confident, almost cocky. We had the smoking gun. Victory felt inevitable. Then, 2 days before we were set to appear in court, disaster struck. It started with an emergency summons from the opposing counsel. They filed an emergency motion to compel, claiming we had withheld crucial evidence. An internal audit from Innovatech, dated 6 months prior to the alleged theft, that detailed significant security vulnerabilities in their own system. Vulnerabilities that would make it possible for an external party to access their servers without leaving a trace. It was evidence that could suggest a third-party hack rather than corporate espionage by Cygnus. It was evidence that could gut our entire case, and according to the rules of discovery, we were legally obligated to have turned it over months ago. I was in the firm's law library when David found me, his face pale. Maya, you need to come to the conference room. Now. All hell has broken loose. I walked into a scene of barely controlled panic. Arthur was on the phone, his voice a low, angry growl. Mr. Harrison was pacing, his face a thunderous shade of red. How could this happen? He bellowed at no one in particular. How could we miss an audit from our own client? Arthur hung up the phone, his knuckles white. Liam's general counsel swears he sent it. He has the email receipt. It was sent directly to me. My blood ran cold. Failure to disclose evidence of that magnitude wasn't just a mistake, it was professional malpractice. It could lead to sanctions, disbarment, and the immediate loss of the case. Arthur Vance, the untouchable rainmaker, had made a catastrophic error. He had single-handedly jeopardized the biggest case in the firm's history. I never saw it, Arthur insisted, his voice strained. It must have gone to spam. Buried, I never saw the email. But I could see the lie in his eyes. The flicker of pure, unadulterated fear. He had seen it, and for some reason, arrogance, carelessness, a belief he could win without it, he had buried it. He had broken the cardinal rule. The rest of the day was a nightmare. The judge was furious. He scheduled an emergency hearing for the following morning to determine sanctions. Our client, Liam Hayes, was apoplectic. The firm was facing a multi-million-dollar malpractice suit and a reputational stain that would take years to scrub away. That night, the office was a tomb. Most of the team had gone home, defeated. I was packing my briefcase when Arthur appeared at my door again. The confident, charming man from a few days ago was gone. In his place was a man staring into the abyss. Maya, he said, his voice raspy, I need your help. You're the only one I can trust. He led me to his sprawling corner office. The city lights twinkled below us, oblivious to the implosion happening on the 45th floor. Close the door, the click of the latch echoing in the silence. I made a mistake, he said, his voice barely a whisper. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. I saw the email with the audit. I glanced at it, flagged it for later, and then the acquisition deal for my brother's company was falling apart. My wife was filing for divorce. I was distracted. I forgot. It got buried under 1,000 other fires. He ran a hand through his perfect silver hair, messing it up for the first time I'd ever seen. He looked me in the eye, his gaze intense and desperate. This will destroy me, Maya. 35 years of work. My name is on the door of this building. It will all be gone. They will take my license. The firm will collapse, everything. I didn't know what to say. I just stared at him, the architect of my career, now a broken man. But there might be a way, he continued, leaning forward. A small one. The evidence was all digital. The email, the attached file. But the discovery protocols required a physical copy to be logged as well, a chain of custody. He walked over to a locked filing cabinet and pulled out a single, thick folder. This is the master file for the Innovatech physical discovery. Every document we've processed is logged here. He placed it on his desk. The log shows that all documents received on the day that email arrived were processed and filed, but the audit isn't in here. He opened the folder and showed me the log sheet. It was a simple checklist of document codes and paralegal initials. The hearing tomorrow, they're going to grill us on procedure, on who handled the physical documents that day. He took a deep breath. According to the log, the associate who signed off on that batch of discovery was you. My heart stopped. I stared at the sheet. There it was, a batch of documents from 6 months ago, and next to it my initials, MS. I had no memory of it, but in the whirlwind of a case this size, I'd initialed hundreds of such logs. I don't understand, I whispered. The physical copy of the audit must have been in that batch, Arthur said, his voice gaining a sliver of its old confidence. It was delivered, you logged it in, and then it must have gotten misplaced. Lost. A simple, human error. A young, overworked associate misfiles a single document in a sea of millions. It's regrettable, certainly. A mistake that will cost you, yes, but it's a survivable mistake. He let the words hang in the air. A survivable mistake, for him, not for me. They will suspend your license maybe for a year or two, he said, his tone now almost clinical. The firm will have to let you go, of course, but you're young, you're brilliant, you can recover from this, you can come back from this. I, on the other hand, I cannot. The trap was laid. It was elegant in its cruelty. He wasn't just shifting blame, he was offering me up as a sacrifice to save himself. My career, my reputation, my future, all to be fed to the fire to keep his own legacy from turning to ash. The firm will take care of you, of course, he added, as if discussing a severance package. A generous settlement. We'll make sure you land on your feet. It's the least we can do. I felt a strange calm settle over me, the kind that comes in the eye of a hurricane. I looked at the man who I had admired, who had mentored me, and I saw him for what he truly was, a coward, a liar, and a predator who would devour his own to survive. What do you need me to do? I asked, my voice steady, betraying none of the rage and terror churning in my gut. He looked relieved. Just tell the truth as we've discussed. You processed the batch. The document was there. You must have misfiled it. You don't know how. You're devastated by your mistake. Stick to that. That's all. I nodded slowly. I picked up my briefcase from the floor. I understand. As I walked toward the door, he called out, Maya, I owe you. When this is all over, I will make this right. I promise. I didn't turn around. I walked out of his office, through the silent, empty bullpen and into the elevator. As the doors slid shut, I leaned against the cool steel wall and took a shaky breath. He thought he had me cornered. He thought I was just another pawn to be sacrificed. He had no idea who he was dealing with. He had no idea that my father hadn't just taught me about the law, he had taught me how to fight. And he had no idea about the small, discreet digital voice recorder in my briefcase, which had been silently capturing every single word of his confession. His promise to make this right was now a permanent, admissible record. The battle wasn't over. It had just begun. The elevator ride down to the lobby felt like a descent into a different reality. The air in the office had been thick with panic and deceit. The night air that hit me as I stepped onto the rain-slick Chicago street was clean and cold, a stark contrast that cleared my head. I didn't go home. Instead, I walked, letting the rhythmic splash of my footsteps on the pavement count out the seconds of my life that had just been irrevocably altered. He thought I was weak. He thought I was a naive, ambitious girl so desperate for his approval that I would commit career suicide to save him. He had mistaken my respect for subservience. It was a mistake many powerful men made. It would be his last. I ducked into a 24-hour diner, the scent of stale coffee and grease a comforting anchor to the real world. Sliding into a worn vinyl booth, I pulled out my laptop and the small digital recorder. My hands were perfectly steady. The rage was a cold, focused energy inside me now, burning away the shock and fear. I plugged the recorder into my laptop and transferred the audio file. I listened to it once just to be sure. Arthur's voice, stripped of its usual commanding tone and laced with desperation, filled my headphones. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. This will destroy me, Maya. The associate who signed off on that batch of discovery was you. They will suspend your license. But you're young, you're brilliant. You can recover from this. Every word was a nail in his own coffin. I saved the file in 3 separate, encrypted cloud locations, then emailed a password-protected copy to a private address I'd set up years ago for emergencies. Paranoia, my friends used to call it. My father called it preparedness. Then I started digging. Arthur had built his story on a single piece of evidence, my initials on a discovery log. I had no memory of that specific log, but that meant nothing. I had processed thousands of documents, but the log itself. I pulled up the firm's document management software. I still had my remote access credentials. For now, I found the electronic version of the log sheet. It was a simple scanned PDF. I zoomed in on my initials, MS. They looked right. The right shape, the right flow. But something felt off. I downloaded the file and opened it in a forensic analysis program I'd learned to use during a white-collar crime internship in law school. The program broke the document down layer by layer. And there it was. The page was a clean scan except for one tiny section, the box containing my initials. The pixel density around the MS was subtly different from the rest of the document. It was a digital forgery, a very, very good one, but not perfect. Someone had lifted my initials from another document and pasted them onto this one. A cold smile touched my lips. He hadn't just lied, he'd manufactured evidence. This changed everything. It elevated his actions from a desperate act of self-preservation to a calculated criminal conspiracy to obstruct justice. My next call was to David Chen. He picked up on the second ring, his voice wary. "Maya, it's almost 3 a.m. Is everything okay?" "No, but it's about to be. I need a favor, David, a big one, and it has to be completely off the books." I could hear the hesitation in his silence. David was a good man, a loyal employee who had a family to support. He hated the firm's politics but had always kept his head down. "What is it?" he finally asked. "I need the original physical copy of the Innovatech Discovery log for Batch 7 be the one dated 6 months ago, the one with my initials on it. I need you to get it from records before anyone else does." There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. "Maya, that's the document from the hearing. It's evidence. Arthur has it locked in his office. I saw him put it there." "I know. But there's always a duplicate. The firm's protocol is to keep a running shadow file in the central records vault, right? For disaster recovery." "Yes, but accessing it requires a partner's signature. Or the master keycard and password that the records manager keeps in the sublevel safe, the one you have access to because you handle overflow storage." I had seen him use it once, a year ago, a detail he probably thought no one noticed. David was meticulous. He kept a small, encrypted thumb drive on his keychain with all the essential passwords he might need in an emergency. Another detail I had filed away. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. I was asking him to risk his job, his entire career, based on my word. "He's framing me, David," I said, my voice low and urgent. "He's going to throw me to the wolves tomorrow to save himself. I have proof he confessed, but I need the original log to prove he forged it. You've seen how he operates. You know he's capable of this." David let out a long, weary sigh. I had worked with him on a dozen cases. We'd shared late-night takeout over piles of documents and commiserated about the soulless nature of corporate law. He knew I was a good lawyer. He also knew Arthur was a ruthless one. "The vault is on sub-level 3, he said, his voice barely a whisper. "The security camera in that hallway has been on a loop for the past week. Maintenance is supposed to fix it tomorrow. I'll have a 1-hour window before the morning security shift starts at 6 a.m. Relief washed over me, so potent it almost made me dizzy. "Thank you, David. You won't regret this." "I already do," he mumbled and hung up. My final call was to my father. It was 4 a.m., but I knew he'd be awake. Old habits from his days on the bench died hard. "Maya," he answered, his voice instantly alert. He could always hear the trouble in my silence. "What's wrong?" I told him everything. The suppressed evidence, Arthur's confession, the forged log, my plan. I laid it all out, my voice clear and methodical like I was presenting a case. When I finished, there was a long pause. "You have the recording?" he asked. "Yes, and the analysis of the scan log. David is getting the original." "Good," he said, his voice hard as granite. "Then you know what you have to do. This isn't just about your career anymore. This is an attack on the integrity of the court. You have an obligation to expose it." "I know, that's why I'm calling you. I need to know about Liam Hayes. Can he be trusted?" My father sighed. "Liam is a good man, but he's a businessman first. He's loyal to results. Right now, he thinks you and the firm have betrayed him. He won't listen to you, not yet. So I'm on my own." "You are never on your own," he said, his voice softening for a moment. "You have the truth, and you have the law. That's more powerful than any firm. Now, here's what you're going to do. The hearing tomorrow is before Judge Eva Rostova. She was my clerk 20 years ago. She's brilliant, she's tough, and she has zero tolerance for courtroom games. She will smell Arthur's lies from a mile away, but she won't act without irrefutable proof. You cannot present your evidence directly. It would be a breach of protocol. You need to get Arthur to perjure himself on the stand." We spent the next hour mapping out a strategy. how to guide the questioning. What phrases to use, how to anticipate the opposing counsel's moves. It was like a masterclass in judicial warfare. By the time the sun began to cast a pale, gray light over the city, I had a plan. At 5:45 a.m., I got a text from a burner phone number. It contained only a single image, a high-resolution photo of the original discovery log. I zoomed in. The box for batch 7B was blank. There were no initials. It was clean. The text was followed by another message. Original is now back where it belongs. This never happened. Good luck. I deleted the messages and the number. I walked out of the diner and into the morning rush. The city was waking up, a giant stirring to life. I felt a surge of adrenaline. I wasn't the scared associate anymore. I was a weapon. Arthur Vance had spent 3 years teaching me how to be a killer in the courtroom. He just never imagined he would be the one in my crosshairs. I went home, showered, and put on my best suit, a charcoal gray armor of confidence. I looked at myself in the mirror. The dark circles under my eyes were still there, but my gaze was clear and steady. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard certainty. The hearing was scheduled for 10 a.m. in the federal courthouse, a monolithic building of stone and glass that always made me feel small. But not today. Today, it felt like my arena. I arrived to find our team huddled together, a small circle of misery. Jessica Riley shot me a look of pure contempt. "I can't believe you," she hissed. "You've ruined everything." I ignored her. My focus was on Arthur. He was standing with the firm's senior partners, looking haggard but composed. He had his game face on. He caught my eye and gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, a final reminder of my role in the day's tragic play. I nodded back, my expression a carefully constructed mask of resignation and fear. I saw Liam Hayes across the hall with his legal team. He looked straight through me, his face a mask of cold fury. This was it. The stage was set. The actors were in place, and I was about to rewrite the entire script. We filed into the courtroom. Judge Rostova was already on the bench, her expression severe. She was a woman who commanded respect without ever having to raise her voice. "You're here to address the motion for sanctions regarding the failure to disclose evidence in the case of Innovatech versus Cygnus Corporation," she began, her voice crisp and clear. "I have reviewed the filings, and I am, to put it mildly, appalled. Mr. Vance, as lead counsel for the plaintiff, perhaps you can enlighten the court as to how such a fundamental breach of discovery could have occurred under your watch." Arthur stood, the picture of contrition. "Your Honor, there is no excuse for what has happened. It was a failure of our internal processes, and I take full responsibility as head of the team." "Responsibility is a fine word, Mr. Vance," the judge replied, her eyes narrowing. "But accountability is what matters here. Who, specifically, was responsible for handling the document in question?" This was the moment. Arthur took a deep breath. "Your Honor, the failure was systemic, but the initial error, the misfilling of the physical document, appears to have been made by a junior associate. It was an oversight, a tragic, regrettable mistake by an overworked young lawyer. He didn't say my name, he didn't have to. Every eye in the courtroom turned to me. I could feel the weight of their judgment, their pity, their scorn. And who is this associate?" Judge Rostova pressed. Arthur looked at me, his eyes filled with a theatrical sadness. "Ms. Maya Singh, Your Honor." The judge looked at me, her gaze unreadable. "Ms. Singh, please approach the witness stand." I stood, my legs steady, and walked to the stand. I was sworn in, my voice clear and unwavering. This was it. Showtime. The witness stand felt less like a cage and more like a platform. The courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. From the corner of my eye, I could see Arthur, his posture a perfect blend of solemnity and regret. He was watching me, expecting a tearful, fumbling confession. He was about to be very disappointed. Judge Rostova leaned forward, her eyes like chips of ice. "Ms. Singh, you are under oath. Do you understand the gravity of this situation?" "Yes, Your Honor, I do," I said, my voice resonating with a calm I didn't entirely feel. "Mr. Vance has suggested that you were the associate responsible for processing the physical discovery batch containing the Innovatech security audit. He alleges that you misplaced this crucial document. Is that your testimony today?" I met her gaze directly. "No, Your Honor, it is not." A ripple went through the courtroom. I saw Arthur flinch, a barely perceptible tightening of his jaw. The partners behind him exchanged confused glances. Jessica Riley's mouth was a thin, hard line of disbelief. "Elaborate, Ms. Singh," the judge commanded, her tone sharpening with interest. "Your Honor," I began, keeping my voice level and professional, "I have reviewed the discovery log for the batch in question, Batch 7B, while the scanned copy provided to the court appears to bear my initials, I have no recollection of processing that specific document. Furthermore, I believe that a forensic examination of the original physical log, which I presume is in Mr. Vance's possession, will show that no initials were ever entered for that batch. Outright denial. It was a high-risk move. I was calling Arthur a liar and a forger in front of a federal judge without yet presenting a shred of evidence. The opposing counsel, a sharp-witted woman named Evelyn Reed, was on her feet instantly. "Objection, Your Honor, speculation. Ms. Singh is making baseless accusations." "Sustained," Judge Rostova said, but her eyes never left my face. "Ms. Singh, you are making an extremely serious allegation. Are you accusing Mr. Vance of fabricating evidence?" "I am stating that the document presented to the court is not an accurate reflection of the original," I answered carefully. "I would respectfully request that the court order Mr. Vance to produce the original physical log for immediate examination." Arthur was already moving, whispering urgently to the firm's counsel. He hadn't expected this. He had expected a compliant scapegoat, not a rebellion. He had planned for tears, not a tactical counteroffensive. "Your Honor," Arthur said, standing and addressing the judge, his voice once again smooth and reasonable. "This is a desperate, last-minute attempt by a junior associate to evade responsibility for a career-ending mistake. It's understandable, but it's baseless. I have the original log right here. I am happy to submit it to the court to put an end to these unfortunate and unprofessional accusations." He walked to the plaintiff's table, opened his pristine leather briefcase, and produced the thick folder. He handed it to the court clerk with a flourish of confidence. It was a masterful performance. He was calling my bluff. He was so certain of his own cleverness, so sure that I had no way of knowing what the original looked like. He believed he was about to publicly humiliate me. The clerk handed the folder to Judge Rostova. She opened it, her expression unreadable. She scanned the log sheet, her eyes moving down the page. The silence in the courtroom stretched for an impossibly long time. I kept my breathing even, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I did not look at Arthur. Finally, the judge looked up. Her gaze was cold enough to freeze fire. She fixed it on Arthur Vance. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice dangerously quiet, "the signature box for Batch 7B on this document is empty." The air was sucked out of the room. Arthur's face went white, a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. He stared at the judge, then at me, his mind racing to understand how his perfect trap had just snapped shut on his own leg. That's impossible," he stammered. "It must be a different copy, a draft. This is the master file you yourself just provided to the court, Mr. Vance. Are you now questioning the authenticity of your own evidence?" Judge Rostova's voice dripped with sarcasm. She held up the document for the clerk to see. "Let the record show that the original log contains no initials for the batch in question." Evelyn Reed was back on her feet. "Your Honor, in light of this, it would appear that not only was evidence withheld, but there has been a clear attempt to mislead this court and frame a junior associate. We demand a full investigation." "Your demand is duly noted, Ms. Reed," the judge said, her glare still fixed on Arthur. "Mr. Vance, do you have an explanation for the discrepancy between the scanned copy you filed with the court and the original you just produced?" Arthur was speechless. He was trapped. If he admitted to altering the document, his career was over. If he claimed ignorance, he would look like an incompetent fool who couldn't even manage his own case files. He chose the latter. I don't know, Your Honor. There must be some explanation. A clerical error. Perhaps my paralegal scanned the wrong version." It was a weak defense, and everyone knew it. The partners behind him looked horrified. The carefully constructed facade of Sterling and Vance was cracking right before their eyes. Judge Rostova was not impressed. "A clerical error that conveniently implicates your junior associate? How fortunate for you. Ms. Singh, you may step down." As I walked back to my seat, I passed David Chen. He refused to look at me, his eyes fixed on the table in front of him, but I saw the corner of his mouth twitch in a tiny, almost imperceptible smile. He had done more than just switch the documents. The original log Arthur had in his office was now the one in the court's hands. David must have found a way to swap the forged one for the clean one. The man was a procedural genius. The rest of the hearing was a rout. Judge Rostova excoriated Arthur and the firm for their gross negligence and flagrant disregard for the rules of professional conduct. She granted the motion for sanctions and announced she was referring the matter of the altered evidence to the State Bar's disciplinary committee for immediate investigation. The Innovatech case was effectively dead in the water. We filed out of the courtroom in stunned silence. The moment we were in the hallway, Arthur grabbed my arm, his fingers digging into my bicep. His face was a mask of fury. "What did you do?" he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. I pulled my arm away, my expression calm. "I told the truth, Arthur. You should try it sometime." "You switched the files," he accused, his eyes wild. "This is your doing. You will regret this. I will destroy you. You will never practice law in this city again." Before I could respond, a new voice cut in. "I don't think you're in a position to be threatening anyone, Arthur." We both turned. Liam Hayes was standing there, flanked by his legal team. His face was like carved stone. He looked from Arthur's furious face to my calm one. "My office. In 1 hour," he said to me, then turned his full attention to Arthur. "As for you, Vance, you and your firm are fired, and you can expect a malpractice suit for the full $10 billion value of my case. I hope your insurance is paid up." He turned and walked away without a backward glance. Arthur looked like he had been physically struck. He stared after Liam, then back at me, his expression a toxic mix of hatred and disbelief. He had lost everything in the span of 30 minutes. His case, his client, his reputation, and quite possibly his license. I walked away, leaving him standing there amidst the ruins of his career. Jessica Riley watched me go, her mouth agape. The other associates avoided my eyes, unsure if I was a hero or a pariah. It didn't matter. I met my father in the courthouse cafeteria. He was sitting at a small table with a cup of coffee, looking as calm as if he'd just finished reading the morning paper. He looked up as I approached, and a slow smile spread across his face. "I heard it was quite the performance." "I just followed the script," I said, a wave of exhaustion finally hitting me. "You did more than that," he said, his eyes filled with a pride that was more valuable to me than any partnership at any firm. "You upheld the law. You chose integrity over ambition." That's what makes a great lawyer, Maya, not the name on the door. An hour later, I was in Liam Hayes' temporary office at a downtown hotel. It was a lavish suite with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Millennium Park. Liam was a man who radiated intensity. He was in his late 60s, fit and sharp, with eyes that missed nothing. He gestured for me to sit. "I owe you an apology, Maya," he began, his voice rough. "I believed Vance. I thought you were the one who betrayed my trust." "He was very convincing," I said. "He's a snake," Liam spat. "A snake I've paid millions of dollars to over the years. That ends today, but that still leaves my case in shambles." He paused, studying me. "Your father tells me you're the sharpest legal mind he's ever seen. He says you were the real brains behind Vance's successes for the past 3 years. "My father is biased," I said with a small smile. "Perhaps, but what I saw in that courtroom today, that wasn't just sharp. That was strategic, that was fearless." He leaned forward, his expression serious. "The case isn't completely dead. We've been granted a 60-day continuance to find new counsel and address the discovery issues. I want you to take over. I want you to be my lead counsel." I was stunned. "Mr. Hayes, Liam, I'm just an associate. And as of this morning, I'm probably a former associate. I don't have a firm, I don't have a team." "You have a team," he said. "I'll fund it, set up your own firm. Hire who you want. I'll provide you with a war chest that will make Sterling and Vance look like a small-town practice. All I want is to win. I want to burn Cygnus Corp to the ground for what they did. And after what he did to you, I want to see Arthur Vance stripped of everything he holds dear. Can you do that for me?" It was an incredible offer, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity born from the ashes of a disaster. It was also terrifying. The weight of a $10 billion lawsuit now rested squarely on my shoulders. I thought of Arthur's threat. "You will never practice law in this city again." A fierce, defiant energy surged through me. Oh, I would practice. And I would do more than just survive. I would thrive. I looked at Liam Hayes, the captain of industry who was betting his entire company on a 30-year-old associate. "Yes," I said, my voice ringing with a newfound confidence. "Yes, I can." The next 48 hours were a whirlwind. The moment I accepted Liam's offer, the world tilted on its axis. I was no longer Maya Singh, the disgraced associate. I was Maya Singh, principal of a brand new, lavishly funded law firm whose sole purpose was to win the Innovatech case and dismantle Arthur Vance's legacy. My first official act was resigning from Sterling and Vance. I didn't do it in person. I sent a crisp, professional email to the managing partners, effective immediately. I didn't mention Arthur or the hearing. I didn't need to. The entire Chicago legal community was already buzzing with the news. Within an hour, a courier delivered a box to my apartment containing my personal effects and a letter from the firm's counsel, a thinly veiled threat about non-disclosure agreements and professional conduct. I filed it away under future leverage. My second act was setting up the new firm. Liam was true to his word. His finance team secured a stunning office space on the top floor of a boutique building in the West Loop, complete with state-of-the-art technology and breathtaking views of the city. He named it Singh and Associates. He said the and Associates was aspirational for now, but he had no doubt I would fill the space with the best and brightest. The war chest he provided was an 8-figure line of credit. I suddenly had the resources to go head-to-head with any firm in the country. But a firm is nothing without its people. I needed a team. My first and only call was to David Chen. I met him at a quiet bar far from the legal district. He looked exhausted, the stress of the past few days etched onto his face. He nursed a beer, watching the door nervously. "You're the talk of the town," he said as I sat down. "Some people are calling you a hero. Others are calling you a backstabbing viper. Jessica Riley is leading that particular fan club." "I can live with that," I said. "How bad is it at the office?" "A bloodbath," he said, taking a long sip of his beer. "Arthur has been suspended indefinitely pending the bar's investigation. The partners are in a full-blown civil war trying to contain the fallout and stop clients from jumping ship. Morale is non-existent." "Good," I said, a little more coldly than I intended. David looked at me, a serious expression on his face. "What you did in that courtroom, Maya, it was legendary, but it was also career suicide. You've made an enemy of one of the most powerful, vindictive men in the city. He won't rest until he finds a way to ruin you." "That's why I need you, David," I said, leaning forward. "I'm starting my own firm. Liam Hayes is backing me. We have the Innovatech case. We have the resources, but I need someone I can trust. I need a senior paralegal, a director of operations, a chief of staff. I need someone who knows the procedures, knows the players, and knows where all the bodies are buried." "I need you." He stared at me, dumbfounded. "You're offering me a job?" "I'm offering you a partnership," I corrected. "Not a name, not yet, but in practice. You'll help me build this firm from the ground up. You'll have a stake in its success, and you'll never have to take orders from another arrogant, incompetent suit again." He was tempted. I could see it in his eyes. The dream of every career paralegal is to be treated as an equal, not a glorified secretary, but he was also cautious. "It's a huge risk, Maya. We'd be going up against Sterling and Vance. They will throw everything they have at us." "Let them," I said, my voice filled with confidence. "We have the truth, we have the resources, and we have something they've lost, integrity." I paused, then played my final card. "And I have the recording of Arthur's confession." David's eyes widened. "You recorded him, the whole thing?" "Every self-serving, incriminating word," I confirmed. "That's our insurance policy. It's the one thing that will keep Arthur Vance in check. The moment he comes after us, we release it. He knows that. It's a stalemate, but it buys us time." He leaned back, a slow smile spreading across his face for the first time. "A partnership, you say?" "And a corner office," I added. He extended his hand across the table. "Well, in that case, where do I sign?" With David on board, things moved quickly. He was a master of logistics. While I focused on the legal strategy for the Innovatech case, he handled everything else, hiring a small, elite team of freelance researchers and junior paralegals, setting up the document management systems, and liaising with Liam's finance team. He was the engine that made the new firm run. We also needed an investigator. The Innovatech case had always felt bigger than just a simple case of corporate espionage. Arthur's decision to bury the security audit felt extreme, even for him. It was a self-destructive act, and I needed to understand why. David knew a guy. "His name is Marco Mac Diaz," he said. "Ex-Chicago PD, now a private investigator. He's a pit bull. If there's a secret to be found, he'll find it. He's expensive, but he's the best." I met Mac at his office, a dusty, cluttered space above a pawn shop that smelled of stale cigars. He was a broad, imposing man in his 50s with a weary face and the sharp, intelligent eyes of a hunter. I laid out the case. I told him about the stolen code, the perjured testimony, and the buried security audit. "It doesn't add up," I concluded. "Why would Arthur risk his entire career to hide a simple security audit? There has to be more to it." Mac listened without saying a word, his eyes never leaving my face. When I was done, he leaned back in his creaky chair. "So, you want me to find out what Arthur Vance is really hiding?" "I want you to find out everything," I said. "His finances, his connections, his enemies. I want to know who he talks to, where he goes, and why he was so terrified of that audit seeing the light of day." Mac grunted. "This kind of digging gets messy, and it gets expensive. Sterling and Vance has deep pockets and a lot of friends in this city." "So do I," said, sliding a cashier's check across the desk. It was for $100,000, a retainer. Mac glanced at the check, then back at me. A flicker of respect appeared in his eyes. All right, Ms. Singh, you've got my attention. I'll start with Cygnus Corp. See if anyone on the inside has a reason to be talking to a certain senior partner at the opposing law firm. While Mac started his dig, I dove back into the case. We had 60 days. It was a monumental task. I had to redepose every key witness, re-examine every piece of evidence, and build a new case from the ground up, this time incorporating the security audit. My new strategy was to argue that Innovatech's security flaws were irrelevant. The core issue was that Cygnus had possession of their proprietary code. How they got it was secondary to the fact that they had it and were using it. The key was the engineer's testimony, which my previous discovery had already proven to be a lie. I spent a week living in the new office, sleeping on the couch and surviving on takeout. David and the small team we'd assembled were right there with me, fueled by a shared sense of purpose. We were the underdogs, a small band of rebels taking on the empire. It was exhausting, exhilarating work. One evening, I was working late when I got an unexpected visitor. Jessica Riley. She stood in the doorway of my office, looking uncertain. Her usual armor of designer clothes and smug superiority was gone. She looked lost. "What do you want, Jessica?" I asked, not looking up from the deposition I was annotating. "I came to," she started, then hesitated. "I heard what Arthur tried to do to you, what he did." "A little late to the party, aren't you?" She flinched. "I know, I was wrong, Maya. I believed him. I thought you were just trying to save yourself. Everyone did." She took a step into the office. "He's a monster. The way he used people, the way he used me. He made all these promises about partnership, about my future. It was all lies. He was just using me to do his dirty work while he took all the credit." It was a story I knew all too well. I finally looked up at her. I saw not my rival, but another victim of Arthur's manipulative ambition. "He asked me to do something," she said, her voice dropping. "After the hearing, he was furious. He wanted me to go through your old files, your emails, anything to find some dirt on you, some mistake he could use to get the bar to disbar you." My blood ran cold. "And did you?" She shook her head, pulling a small thumb drive from her pocket. "No, but I did find something he didn't know I knew about." She placed the thumb drive on my desk. "These are from the firm's internal server. It's a series of encrypted emails between Arthur and someone at the SEC. They're from a year ago. I couldn't decrypt them, but the subject lines are all about Cygnus Corp inquiry." My heart started to pound. The SEC. Cygnus Corp, what did it mean? "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked, my voice suspicious. "Because he threw me away the second I was no longer useful," she said, her eyes flashing with a new, hard anger. "He's trying to blame the whole Innovatech disaster on me now, saying I mismanaged the junior associates. He's trying to make me his new scapegoat." She looked me in the eye. "I'm not going to let that happen. I'm resigning tomorrow. But before I go, I want to see him burn. And you're the only one with enough matches." She turned and walked out, leaving the thumb drive on my desk. It felt like a small, ticking bomb. It was a piece of the puzzle, but I had no idea how it fit, but I knew who could find out. The next morning, I was back in Mac Diaz's office. I gave him the drive. "I need to know what's on this, and I need to know who at Cygnus Corp Arthur Vance was protecting." Mac took the drive, a grim look on his face. "This just got a lot more interesting." He looked up at me. "You know, kid, you're making some powerful enemies, but you're making some interesting allies, too. This is going to be one hell of a fight." "I know," I said. "That's why I'm going to win." The 60-day continuance passed in a relentless storm of work. My team and I practically lived in the new office, a gleaming tower that felt more like a fortress. We were building a case, but we were also building a company, and the two tasks were inextricably linked. The pressure was immense, but for the first time in my career, it was a pressure I welcomed. It was mine. David was a miracle worker. He staffed our firm with a small but fiercely loyal team of legal aides and researchers who were tired of the soul-crushing bureaucracy of big law. He called them the legal misfits. They were brilliant, hungry, and they saw me not as a disgraced associate, but as a giant slayer. Their energy was infectious. While we prepared for the new trial date, Mac Diaz was a ghost, moving through the city's undercurrents. He'd check in with cryptic text messages, following a money trail, found a shell corporation. The Cygnus engineer likes expensive hobbies. Each message was a breadcrumb leading deeper into the labyrinth of Arthur Vance's secrets. The encrypted emails from Jessica's thumb drive were the key. Mac brought in a freelance cybersecurity expert, a woman known only as Nix, who worked out of a server farm in a nondescript suburban warehouse. It took her a week, but she cracked them. Mac called me in for a meeting. His office was the same dusty, cigar-scented den, but the atmosphere was different. It was charged with the thrill of the hunt. Nix was there, a young woman with neon pink hair and a laptop covered in anarchist stickers, who looked like she could dismantle a country's financial system between sips of her energy drink. "Your boy Arthur Vance is dirtier than a city sewer," Mac said, foregoing any preamble. He slid a folder across his desk. It was filled with printouts of the decrypted emails. The story they told was staggering. A year before the Innovatech lawsuit, the SEC had opened a confidential inquiry into Cygnus Corp for massive accounting fraud and insider trading. The executive at the center of the investigation was their chief financial officer, a man named Julian Croft. And the person who had tipped off the SEC, providing them with the initial evidence in exchange for immunity, was Arthur Vance. I stared at the documents, my mind reeling. Arthur was an informant for the SEC against Cygnus. Not just an informant, Nick said, tapping on her laptop. He was their handler. He fed them information for months. But then 6 months ago, right around the time Liam Hayes filed his lawsuit against Cygnus, the communication stopped. The inquiry stalled. Croft is still CFO. "Why?" I asked, looking at Mac. "Why would he stop?" "Because he made a better deal," Mac said, his voice grim. He slid another document across the desk. It was a bank statement for an offshore account in the Cayman Islands, registered to a shell corporation. The corporation was registered to Arthur's brother. 6 months ago, it had received a single wire transfer from another shell corporation, this one linked to Julian Croft at Cygnus. The amount was $10 million. The pieces of the puzzle slammed into place with sickening clarity. "He took a bribe," I whispered, the words tasting like poison. Arthur was investigating Cygnus for the SEC. He must have found something huge, something that could destroy them. So their CFO, Croft, paid him $10 million to make it all go away. "Exactly," Mac confirmed. "And then your Innovatech lawsuit landed on his desk. It was a nightmare for him. A full-blown legal war with Cygnus was the last thing he wanted. Discovery, depositions, it would risk exposing his own dirty deal. He had to kill the case." And then I understood. The security audit. "The audit showed Innovatech had weak security," I said, thinking aloud. "It created a narrative that a third-party hacker could have stolen the code. It wasn't definitive proof, but it was enough to muddy the waters, to create reasonable doubt. If Arthur used it, he could have tanked his own client's case and gotten it dismissed quickly. No fuss, no deep dive into Cygnus's internal affairs. But he couldn't just present it," Mac said, picking up the thread. "That would look like he was sabotaging his own case, so he buried it. He deliberately withheld evidence, hoping to get caught. He wanted the case to be thrown out on a technicality, a malpractice charge. It was the perfect crime. The firm would take the hit, Liam would be furious, but Arthur's secret deal with Cygnus would be safe. He would survive. And he was going to pin the whole malpractice charge on me," I finished, a cold fury rising within me. He wasn't just trying to save his career. He was trying to cover up a federal crime. This was bigger than I had ever imagined. This wasn't just about a stolen case or a forged document. This was about massive corporate corruption, bribery, and a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of two of the city's most powerful entities. "What about the engineer?" I asked. "The one whose testimony I broke?" "Just a pawn," Mac said with a shrug. Croft probably paid him a handsome bonus to lie in his deposition, to create a plausible story for how they got the code. When you exposed him, it threw a wrench in their plans. It meant the case would get ugly, and Arthur couldn't afford that. The scale of his betrayal was breathtaking. He had been willing to sacrifice me, his firm, and his own client, all to protect his $10 million secret. "What do we do with this?" I asked, my voice shaking slightly. "We give it to the SEC," Mac said simply. "The real SEC, not the agents Vance was talking to. I have a contact in the Inspector General's office, someone who investigates corruption within the agency. This is the kind of case that makes careers." "Not yet," I said, my mind racing. "If we go to the SEC now, the Innovatech case gets buried in their investigation. Liam will never get his justice. And Arthur, a man like him, he'll find a way to cut another deal, to wriggle out of it. I want him to face a jury. I want him to face Liam. I want to take him down in open court." Mac studied me, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "That's a hell of a gamble, kid. You'd be sitting on evidence of a federal crime." "For now," I said, "we have a trial in 3 weeks. I'm going to win it. I'm going to prove Cygnus stole the code. And then, when Arthur has nowhere left to run, when his reputation is already in tatters, then we give this to the world. We don't just want him disbarred, we want him destroyed. It was a dangerous, audacious plan. It required me to walk a legal and ethical tightrope. But the thought of seeing Arthur Vance's face when he realized I knew his deepest, darkest secret, it was a powerful motivator. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Knowing the truth changed my entire approach to the case. Every question I prepared for deposition, every motion I filed, was now double-edged. It was about winning the case for Liam, but it was also about building a public scaffold for Arthur Vance. I redeposed the Cygnus engineer. This time, I didn't just ask about his whereabouts. I asked about his finances. I asked about recent bonuses. I asked about any meetings he'd had with Julian Croft. His lawyer, a junior partner from a rival firm, objected to everything, but the seeds of panic were sown. The engineer was sweating under the lights. He knew I was getting close to something. Then I filed a motion so unexpected, so audacious, that it sent shockwaves through the opposing counsel. I subpoenaed Arthur Vance to testify as a witness. His lawyers fought it tooth and nail. They argued he had no relevant testimony to offer, that it was a vindictive tactic designed to harass him, but I had a legal basis. Arthur was the original lead counsel. He had intimate knowledge of the evidence. And since he was no longer representing the plaintiff, his testimony was fair game. Judge Rostova, intrigued by the move, granted my motion. Arthur Vance would have to take the stand. He would have to answer my questions under oath. The night before the trial, my team gathered in the conference room, the legal misfits. We had takeout pizza and beer, a small moment of calm before the final battle. "Are you ready for this?" David asked me, his expression a mixture of awe and anxiety. "I've been ready for this my whole life," I said, looking out at the glittering city. "He taught me how to be a lawyer. Tomorrow I'm going to show him what a good student I was." The day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. The legal community had turned out in force to witness the showdown. It was David versus Goliath, the upstart boutique firm against the wounded giant. Liam Hayes sat at my side, his expression grim but resolute. Across the aisle, the Cygnus legal team looked nervous. And in the back of the courtroom, I saw Arthur Vance, sitting with his lawyers, his face a thunderous mask. He thought he was there as a spectator. He had no idea he was about to become the main event. I delivered my opening statement, my voice clear and steady. I laid out the case, the stolen code, the web of lies. I ended by looking directly at the jury. "This case is about more than just stolen technology," I said. "It's about a culture of corruption, a belief that the powerful can take what they want without consequence. Today, we are going to show you the consequences." My first witness was the Cygnus engineer. I walked him through his previous lies, tearing his credibility to shreds with flight manifests and access logs. Then I moved on to his finances. His lawyer objected, but Judge Rostova overruled him. "It goes to motive, counsel. Proceed, Ms. Singh." I presented the jury with evidence of a recent, unexplained $50,000 deposit into his account. He crumbled. He admitted Croft had paid him to lie. The first domino had fallen. Then I called my next witness. The plaintiff calls Arthur Vance to the stand. A wave of shock went through the courtroom. Arthur's face went pale. He had been so sure he was untouchable. He walked to the stand, a man walking to his own execution. He was sworn in, his hand trembling slightly. I stood before him, the notes for my questioning in hand, but I didn't need them. I knew exactly what I was going to ask. "Mr. Vance," I began, my voice ringing through the silent courtroom. "Let's talk about Cygnus Corp." Arthur settled into the witness chair, arranging his suit jacket with a practiced air of composure. But I could see the tension in his shoulders, the faint tremor in his hand as he adjusted the microphone. The courtroom was his stage, but for the first time, he wasn't the director. He was an actor in a play I had written, and he didn't know the ending. "Mr. Vance," I began, my voice calm and measured, "you were the original lead counsel on this case. Is that correct?" "Yes," he answered, his voice a low, steady baritone. He was a professional. He wouldn't show fear. "And in your initial assessment of the case, you believed it to be a strong one for your client, Innovatech?" "I believed it had merit, yes." "Merit enough to dedicate thousands of hours and millions of dollars of the firm's resources to it?" "Yes." I let that hang in the air for a moment. "Mr. Vance, are you familiar with the SEC's Office of the Whistleblower?" His lawyers were instantly on their feet. "Objection. Relevance, Your Honor." "I have a basis, Your Honor," I said, addressing the judge. "It speaks directly to Mr. Vance's prior relationship with the defendant, Cygnus Corp., and his conduct as counsel in this very case." Judge Rostova looked intrigued. Overruled. You have a short leash, Ms. Singh. Make your point. I turned back to Arthur. Mr. Vance, have you ever acted as a confidential informant for the Securities and Exchange Commission? His composure finally cracked. A flicker of pure panic flashed in his eyes before he suppressed it. I object to this line of questioning on the grounds that it may violate confidential informant privilege. There is no such privilege for a witness in a civil trial when the information is pertinent to the case at hand, Mr. Vance, and you know it, I countered smoothly. Let me rephrase. Did you, approximately 1 year ago, provide information to the SEC regarding potential accounting fraud at Cygnus Corp? He was trapped. If he lied and I produced the emails, he would be charged with perjury. If he pleaded the fifth, he would look guilty as sin to the jury. I have from time to time consulted with various government agencies on matters within my expertise, he said, a masterful non-answer. And was one of those matters the financial conduct of Cygnus Corp's chief financial officer, Julian Croft? Objection, his lawyer shouted again. Overruled, Judge Rostova snapped, her patience clearly wearing thin. Answer the question, Mr. Vance. Arthur looked at the jury, at the judge, at me. He was cornered. Yes, he finally conceded. The word dragged from him like a tooth. The courtroom buzzed. A senior partner at a major law firm admitting to being an informant against a potential client was unheard of. Thank you for your honesty, I said, my voice dripping with irony. And did there come a time when you ceased your cooperation with the SEC regarding Mr. Croft? My consultations are on an as-needed basis. They are not ongoing. Is it not true, Mr. Vance, that your cooperation ended abruptly 6 months ago, shortly after you received a wire transfer for $10 million into a Cayman Islands account controlled by your brother? The bomb had dropped. The courtroom erupted. Arthur's face turned ashen. His lawyer was shouting objections, but his voice was lost in the chaos. Judge Rostova slammed her gavel. Order, she boomed. Order in this court. When the room had quieted, she turned to me, her expression grim. Ms. Singh, you have just made an accusation of a major felony in open court. You had better be able to back it up. I can, Your Honor, I said, my voice ringing with certainty. I walked to the clerk and handed her a folder. Plaintiff's Exhibit A certified bank records from the Cayman Islands and a sworn affidavit from a cybersecurity expert tracing the source of the funds to a shell corporation owned by Julian Croft. The clerk handed the documents to the judge. As she reviewed them, Arthur Vance seemed to shrink in his chair. The invincible rainmaker was gone. In his place was a common criminal, his sordid secrets laid bare for the world to see. Mr. Vance, I continued, my voice relentless. Isn't it true that you deliberately withheld the Innovatech security audit not because of a simple mistake, but because you needed this lawsuit to disappear? Because a full discovery process into Cygnus would have exposed your bribe and your conspiracy with their CFO? He didn't answer. He just stared at me, his eyes filled with a new emotion, pure, unadulterated hatred. Isn't it true, I pressed on, my voice rising, that you then forged my initials on a legal document and attempted to frame me, your own mentee, for malpractice? That you were willing to sacrifice my career, my future, and your own client's case, all to cover up your $10 million crime? I let the question hang in the air, the silence of the courtroom my only answer. He had no defense. There was no clever legal argument that could save him now. I turned to the judge. No further questions for this witness, Your Honor. The trial was over. We all knew it. The jury was a formality. Cygnus Corp's legal team looked as shell-shocked as Arthur. Their star witness had been exposed as a liar, and their CFO was now implicated in a massive bribery scandal. Judge Rostova called a recess. As Arthur stepped down from the stand, 2 men in dark suits who had been sitting quietly in the back of the courtroom stood up and approached him. Federal agents. One of them flashed a badge. Arthur Vance, the agent said, his voice low but audible in the quiet room. You need to come with us. They escorted him out of the courtroom, not in handcuffs, but the implication was clear. His life as a respected lawyer was over. His new life as a federal defendant had just begun. The jury returned their verdict in less than an hour. They found Cygnus Corp guilty of corporate espionage and awarded Innovatech $9 billion in damages, one of the largest verdicts in the state's history. As the foreman read the verdict, Liam Hayes gripped my arm, his knuckles white. When the amount was announced, he let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for years. The courtroom exploded into a flurry of activity. Reporters rushed for the doors. Liam hugged me, a rare display of emotion from the stoic CEO. You did it, Maya. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected, looking back at David and my team, who were celebrating with a mixture of cheers and tears. That evening, we held a small victory party in our new office. We ordered champagne and the most expensive catering in the city. My father was there, beaming with pride. Liam Hayes gave a toast. To Maya Singh, he said, raising his glass, who reminded us all that the truth is still the most powerful weapon in any arsenal, and to Singh and Associates, a firm built not on a name but on courage and integrity. It was the perfect ending to an impossible battle, but I knew it wasn't just an ending. It was a beginning. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was immense. Julian Croft was arrested. Cygnus Corp's board was cleaned out, and the company was forced into a massive restructuring. Sterling and Vance, facing a ruinous malpractice suit and a mass exodus of clients, was forced to merge with a larger, out-of-state firm, its once proud name erased from the Chicago skyline. My firm, on the other hand, became the hottest legal practice in the city. Job applications poured in from the best and brightest young lawyers, all wanting to be part of the firm that took down Arthur Vance. We were inundated with requests from potential clients, from tech startups to Fortune 500 companies, all looking for legal counsel with a conscience. I hired Jessica Riley as our newest associate. She had proven her loyalty and her courage. She, like me, deserved a second chance in a place that valued her for her mind, not her willingness to play the game. One afternoon, months after the trial, I was working in my office when my assistant buzzed. "There's a Mr. Vance here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment." I was surprised. Arthur was out on bail awaiting his federal trial. I couldn't imagine what he would want. Curiosity got the better of me. "Send him in." He looked like a different man. The expensive suit was gone, replaced by a simple sports coat. He looked older, tired, and smaller. He stood awkwardly in the doorway of my large corner office, the same kind of office he once had. "Maya," he said, his voice raspy, "I just wanted to understand." "Understand what, Arthur?" "Why?" he asked, his eyes searching my face. "You had the recording of my confession. You could have just gone to the partners, got me fired, and saved your own career. Why did you have to burn everything to the ground? Why the public spectacle?" I leaned back in my chair and looked at the man who had been my mentor and my tormentor. He still didn't get it. He thought it was all about revenge. "Because it was never just about saving my career, Arthur," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You didn't just try to frame me. You committed a crime. You corrupted the legal process you swore an oath to uphold. You betrayed your client, your firm, and every principle the law is supposed to stand for." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. "You asked me why. You want to know why I didn't just take the quiet deal? Because you taught me to. You taught me to never settle, to never back down, and to always go for the kill shot. You were just so arrogant you never imagined you'd be the one on the other side of the table." I turned back to him. "This wasn't about revenge, Arthur. This was about justice, a concept you seem to have forgotten. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a firm to run." He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. It was the last time I ever saw him. He was eventually convicted on all charges and sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. As I watched him go, I didn't feel triumph or hatred. I just felt a quiet sense of closure. The battle was finally, truly over. The work, however, was just beginning. Building a new kind of law firm, one based on ethics and integrity, was a challenge far greater than winning a single case. There would be more battles, more powerful men who believed the rules didn't apply to them. But now I was ready. I had my team, I had my principles, and I had a name that was becoming synonymous not with power, but with something far more lasting: justice. I had found my purpose, not in the hallowed halls of a prestigious firm, but in the ashes of its corruption. I had built my own table, and at this table, everyone had a voice, and the only thing that mattered was the truth. It was a foundation made not of steel and glass, but of something much stronger. It was a foundation made of integrity. Life after the trial settled into a new, demanding rhythm. The victory against Arthur Vance and Cygnus Corp wasn't a finish line, it was a starting pistol. Singh and Associates was no longer just a name on a letterhead. It was a symbol, a beacon for clients who were tired of the old games, and for lawyers who yearned to practice with a purpose. We grew, but we grew carefully. I remembered the toxic culture at Sterling and Vance, a place where ambition curdled into a zero-sum game of backstabbing and credit stealing. I was determined to build the opposite. Our hiring process became as much about character as it was about credentials. We looked for lawyers who were not just brilliant, but empathetic, not just aggressive, but ethical. David, now our chief operating officer, joked that our firm had the most rigorous no-asshole policy in the country. Our client list expanded beyond what I could have imagined. We took on cases that other firms deemed too risky or not profitable enough. We defended whistleblowers against powerful corporations. We represented small inventors whose patents had been stolen by tech giants. We fought for environmental groups against polluting industries. Each case was a new battle, but the core principle remained the same: to give a voice to those who were being silenced by power and money. Liam Hayes remained our anchor client and one of my most trusted advisors. His faith in me had been the catalyst for everything, and our relationship evolved from client counsel to a deep, mutual respect. He served on our firm's advisory board, his business acumen tempering my legal idealism. "Justice is a noble pursuit, Maya," he once told me over lunch, "but a law firm that can't make payroll is a noble failure. Never forget that." It was advice I took to heart. We were a mission-driven firm, but we were also a business. I learned to be a CEO as well as a lawyer, balancing the books, managing growth, and nurturing our unique culture. One of the most rewarding aspects of our work was the Vance Initiative, a pro bono program we established to provide legal aid to young professionals who had been victims of workplace harassment or exploitation. We helped them fight back, armed with the knowledge and resources I never had when I was in their shoes. Each person we helped was a small victory against the thousands of Arthurs in the world. Mac Diaz became our firm's in-house investigator, his dusty office replaced by a sleek, high-tech command center in our building. He and Nix, our resident cyber sleuth, formed a formidable duo, unearthing secrets and digital breadcrumbs that often became the linchpin of our cases. They were our guardians, ensuring we were never outmaneuvered or caught by surprise. Years passed. The firm flourished. We opened offices in New York and San Francisco. My father, now fully retired, would sometimes visit, walking through our bustling office with a quiet, satisfied smile. He never said, "I told you so," but his pride was a tangible presence, a silent affirmation of the path I had chosen. One crisp autumn afternoon, about 5 years after the trial, I was invited to give the commencement address at my old law school. I stood at the podium, looking out at a sea of bright, ambitious faces, all on the cusp of the life I had once so desperately wanted. I saw myself in them. I saw the hunger for success, the desire to make a mark on the world. I thought about the speech I would have given years ago, filled with talk of billable hours, partnership tracks, and courtroom victories. But the speech I gave that day was different. "Good afternoon," I began, my voice clear and strong. "You are about to enter a profession of immense power, the power to create, to destroy, to defend, and to prosecute. You have spent years learning the letter of the law. I'm here today to talk about its spirit." I told them my story, not the sensational, headline-grabbing version, but the real one. I spoke of the quiet compromises, the allure of ambition, and the moment I was faced with a choice between my career and my conscience. "The most important case you will ever work on," I told them, "is the case for your own integrity. It's a case you will have to argue every single day, in big ways and in small. There will be moments when you are asked to bend the truth for a client, to overlook an inconvenient fact for a partner, to sacrifice your principles for a promotion. And in those moments, your career, and more importantly, your character, will be defined." I looked out at the young, hopeful faces. Success in this profession is not measured by the size of your office or the balance in your bank account. It's measured by the trust you earn, the justice you deliver, and the person you see in the mirror at the end of a long, hard day. It's about building a legacy, not just a resume. I concluded my speech with a final thought, a piece of advice that had become my firm's unofficial motto. Don't just aim to be a great lawyer. Aim to be a good one. The world has plenty of the former and not nearly enough of the latter. Your clients, your colleagues, and your conscience will thank you for it. As the graduates rose for a standing ovation, I felt a profound sense of peace. The scars from my battle with Arthur Vance were still there, but they no longer ached. They had become a map, a reminder of the journey that had forged me into the person I was. After the ceremony, a young woman with bright, intelligent eyes approached me. "Ms. Singh," she said, her voice filled with a nervous energy I recognized all too well. "I'm graduating top of my class. I have offers from all the big firms. But after hearing you speak, I want to work for you. I want to be part of something that matters." I smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. I handed her my card. "Send me your resume," I said. We're always looking for good people. Walking off that campus, I wasn't just a lawyer or a CEO. I was a mentor, a leader, and a testament to the idea that you can fight the system and win. You can be cast out, betrayed, and left for dead, and you can still rise from the ashes, stronger and more purposeful than before. My story wasn't about revenge. Revenge is an ending. My story was about a new beginning. It was about discovering that the greatest victory isn't in tearing down the old guard, but in building something better in its place. It was about creating a space where justice wasn't just a word in a law book, but a lived reality. And that was a legacy worth fighting for. The battle against Arthur Vance was over, but the fight for a better way to practice law and to live a life of purpose would continue. And I was ready for it.